Good morning. John chapter 1, verse 16 and 17. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. From his fullness, from the fullness of his divine character, we have received grace upon grace, the ESV says. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So, a couple of important pieces here. What does it mean to say grace upon grace? We've received, from his fullness, we've received grace upon grace. Grace, in Greek, grace, charis, anti, charis. The best way of explaining this in Greek is probably to say something like grace instead of grace, or grace in place of grace. Here it says grace upon grace. Well, grace upon grace could lead us to think that it's this idea of we're receiving grace and then more grace and more grace, the idea that grace flows from Christ abundantly. And that's true, but I'm not sure that's what's actually being said here. I think the point is to show that this baby who came and was made flesh brings about a new economy of relating to God, so that we should understand it in light of verse 17. That verse 17 is actually explicating verse 16. So let's read it again. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace, anti grace, grace instead of or grace in place of grace. For the law was given through Moses. That's the first grace. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Well, how was the law a grace? Well, the law was a grace clearly from God, because God gave the law as a gracious standard of expectation by which one would receive blessing or cursing. You see that in Deuteronomy. And you see that the follow-through of that, the effects of obedience, the results of obedience or the results of disobedience. In that way, it's kind of a gracious standard that one could then mark their life in terms of its correspondence to covenant expectations. God calls a people to himself. He wants to bless them. Well, how would they know if they were on the side of blessing or cursing? Well, by their adherence to the law. God gives the grace of law in that way, which Paul says it was a schoolmaster that brought me to Christ. This grace of law and contrasted to the grace of the new covenant. It's precisely what you see, by the way, in 2 Corinthians, as Paul in 2 Corinthians 3:7 says, Now if the ministry of death, carved in letters on stone, came with such glory that the Israelites could not gaze at Moses' face because of its glory, which was being brought to an end, will not the ministry of the Spirit have even more glory? And he goes on and draws further contrast here, but the point that he makes in chapter 3, verse 7, really all the way down through the end of chapter 3 in 2 Corinthians, is to say, if the old covenant had this glory, how much more this new covenant that comes as a gracious expression of the character of God, drawing us to himself to be his people and live under the economy of grace. So when we go back to John chapter 1, what we find is that we all received grace, the grace of law, he's saying, but now this baby brings something new, the grace of the new covenant. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth come through Jesus Christ. What's happening is John is introducing to his readers the new economy of relating to God through the grace that will come from this little child. Praise be his name, that we receive that grace by way of the incarnation, then by way of the cross, then by way of the resurrection and ascension. Have a wonderful day.